Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. I am so excited about this episode for several reasons. So first of all, this is an experiment for me. I get the opportunity to introduce all of you to two incredible women leaders at one time. So how awesome is that? And secondly, this episode is the first in a multi-episode series on gender wealth equity, which I'm also excited about. It's a topic that we all need to care about for our own futures, as well as for the futures of our larger communities. Our first guest, Jenifer Sapel, is the founder and CEO of Utor Wealth, where they help high-earning women become financially confident through financial planning and investment management. Her partner in crime and wealth advisor at Utor is Parrish. She is also a self-proclaimed air traffic controller of finances, which I'm going to ask about later. So welcome, Jenifer and Carol, to the podcast.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. I can tell already. So as our listeners know, I love to start our conversation by learning more about the guest stories. So Jenifer, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit more about your career journey and what led you to start Utor Wealth.
Sure. I was a kid who, before my parents got divorced, we had like a really cushy life. And then post-divorce, my mom really struggled financially. So as a kid, I was like, I'm not doing that. Like whatever that is, I'm not doing it. And really vowed that I would never be dependent financially on somebody else. I'm also the firstborn daughter and a type A personality and was a sports player. So I was really like driven and competitive and, perfectionism, all things that I'm still getting over, but, I've had to improve upon. And financial services wasn't necessarily the route that I thought I was going to take. I managed a gym for a long time. I got into financial services, kind of by accident. I was recruited into it, but it's been 20 years now, and I absolutely love it. What I love that it's offered me, the ability to be financially independent, but to help other people to kind of avoid the kind of life that I had as a childhood. And I can really identify with like insecurities around money in general.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I don't think I understood the real whys behind it. But I remember one of the reasons that I went into engineering was I knew I could be financially independent. So I knew that I could make my own decisions about whatever personal path I wanted to pursue. So it's funny that you say that. Yes. So Carol, on the outside, I said you were an air traffic controller of finances, which I just think is fantastic. I don't know who came up with that, but they're dead on in marketing.
I don't really think I'm very creative, but I actually came up with that one. So.
All right. So tell me how you came up with it.
Well, so I think we talked about this before, but our official title is financial advisor, which I don't know about Jen, but I hate that term because it's so, I don't know, kind of bro-ish, but it's also, it can mean like 12 million different things to 12 million different people. And so I work with a lot of women in aerospace, and I was traveling one day and thinking about that. And I was like, well, really? Air traffic controllers are trying to keep all the planes coming in at different times from different directions in different conditions and keep them from crashing. And really, that's kind of what we do. Like, we have to look at the whole picture, all the different planes and pieces of women's financial lives. And sometimes storms are bad, sometimes they're not, or there aren't storms, and we have to continue to manage that. So that's how I came up with it. And my AirPods just made a funny noise, so I'm probably going to have to take them out.
We didn't hear the noise.
We didn't hear it. So you're good right now. We didn't hear it.
They're going to die soon.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to let you take a break, and I will keep rolling. Jenifer and I'll keep rolling. And then Carol, you can jump back on in just a second. So this topic of gender wealth equity has really intrigued me. We all have heard about the gender pay gap. There's a lot of conversation around that, but what I do not hear people talking about is gender wealth equity. So I'm admittedly at the surface, but I'm starting to dig in. And there's a 2022 gender wealth report that was released in November of 2022. And in this report, which is based on research from WTW and the World Economic Forum, they say, and I quote, there is a significant gender wealth gap between men and women at retirement. Upon retirement, women globally are expected to accumulate only 74% of the wealth that men have, which is according to their wealth equity index. And I will put a link to this report in the show notes. But what really bothered me about this, actually, I've seen worse numbers, is that women, at least in the US, on average, live 5 years longer than men. So if you take those two statistics and you put them together, we're in a recipe for a bit of a disaster. So I'm curious, and Jenifer, I'll start with you while Carol's getting ramped up here. So outside of the gender pay gap, what do you see as barriers to closing this gap for women?
There's so many.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd add to your, kind of like perfect storm. Not only do we live longer, but we also need more in terms of healthcare. And part of that is because we live longer. But yeah, any underrepresented group, if you're underrepresented in any fashion whatsoever, it has an impact on your overall health. So that's a whole nother ball of wax and can of worms in general. But I think, to answer your question, like some of the other barriers to closing the gap is that Carol and I work in financial services. It's an entire industry that's built by men. And in a lot of ways doesn't appeal to women. Like, for example, the software we use to project out into the future, like future financial scenarios, automatically defaults to client and spouse of client. It doesn't default to client, doesn't default to, it also defaults that spouse of client doesn't have access to all of the data. The spouse has to give the partner access to the data. Yeah. And I'm like the three of us on this, in this conversation understand how that happened. It was a group of wealthy white men sitting in a room going, of course, that's how it should be. And if one of us were sitting in that room, we'd be like, excuse me, no. The woman in a cis, heteronormative relationship makes 85% of the purchase decisions. Like, they should have a say and access to the same data that their spouse does. So that's just like one, little example. I think we also live within larger systems that are kind of, again, like gender normative, more masculine in tendency, or like more competitive in tendency. So things like a scoreboard and accumulating and winning and highest score are like kind of the drivers. And no client of mine, man or woman or anything in between, no client of mine has come to me saying, I want to die with the most amount of money. Like, that's just not the objective, right? They want to live well. They want to live securely. They want to not run out of money. They want to have options with their money. But nobody comes to me being like, well, I want to die with the maximum amount of money. But even the software system that we subscribe to, like, that's the default solve, is how do we maximize money going into the next generation? So that's a big part of it, is that, financial services, if you're looking for guidance and advice, what we're finding there in predominant narratives, like, don't resonate with the entire population. I think that's a huge barrier. Another one is just time constraint. So if you have looked at any of the data and the numbers, like, even women in, again, heteronormative households, even women who out earn their spouse do more of the unpaid labor around the household. So, like, we're doing more. That doesn't even count. Again, we don't all know each other all that well, but we could probably talk about like how much of the emotional labor I'm carrying in the house, right? And how much, like, we're planning all the birthday parties and we're doing all of that, all of those kinds of things. So we're literally time constrained and energy constrained. And so when you add that to, we have less time and less energy to do more things, plus we got to do our hair and makeup and whatever, right? We have less of it. And then you meet it with the industry that's supposed to guide us doesn't do anything that's appealing for us at all. I think those are like two major barriers to closing that gap.
Yeah, it's really funny that you say that, because, and we'll get into this in a second, I love math, but it's finances. I avoid it like the plague. We're going to touch on that in a minute. So to your point, if I'm tired at the end of the day, the last thing I want to go do is either have a meeting with the air traffic controller. I'm not going to use the advisor word, or to even go on the software, whatever I have access to, and try to figure it out. Yep, you're right. I'm just like, yeah, I don't have the mental or emotional energy to even think about doing that. Yeah, that is so true. Carol, anything you want to add? Hopefully you can hear me at this point. I think you look like you got your other
I have
earbuds back on.
Yeah.
Okay.
As an air traffic controller, I gotta be on
gotta
my
have
game and
backup. That's right.
So
It was smooth.
yeah, so I should have started with the wired ones, but no, I think she summed it up. I mean, we women in general we've started behind. And I think you and I, Shannon, when we first met, maybe have this conversation, but I mean, women couldn't even take out a business loan without a man's signature until 1988. Like, I was in high school when that happened. And when
That
I
is
think,
so
oh my
hard
God,
to believe.
like my mom couldn't even go to the bank and take out a business loan if she wanted to, just like blows my mind. But now looking back on it, it explains so much. And like
Our credit card's similar. They're not much younger. It's like the
it was
70s,
like
right?
1974. Yeah. And I can't even imagine. Like, when I talk to my daughter like that, she'd be like, what? Like, how old are you? Thinking like she can't even fathom that. So
yeah, I can't fathom the credit card thing. That blows my mind, especially in the world where we do so much of our, I'm gonna call it transactional money management.
Oh yeah.
With a credit card. That's crazy. Yep. So what actions, Carol, I'll start with you and then we'll go back to Jenifer. What actions do you think our listeners can take to address some of those barriers? So we talked about things that are very systemic. What things maybe they can create more energy in their brain for it? Maybe the scorecard can't scare them as much. I don't know. But Carol, what do you think they could take a shot at doing to try to close that gap?
Well, I mean, there's a number of different things, but for me, like, one of the first places to start is like they have to be comfortable with like, let's look at the mindset first, because it's all of the things that the beliefs and things that we have around money all come from the way we were raised. And like Jenifer talked about, how money became an issue for her early on, and that shaped her perception about, no, I'm not going to be in that position. But I think negative and positive feelings that we have about money are shaped early, and until we recognize what those are, we can't really start thinking about actually how to handle money. Because if we have problems, doesn't matter how much money we have. I mean, some of the wealthiest people in the world, like bank account wise, and I know wealth covers a lot of different things, still aren't comfortable with money and can't handle things on their own. Or I was looking at an article today, actually, on LinkedIn, where the woman was talking about women being 6-figure broke women, where they earn six figures, but because they can't handle money or don't have the right mindset, they still maybe spend it all, or still haven't built their wealth up because they haven't tackled the other underlying issues first. So
it's funny, Carol, that you say that, because I can tell you one of my personal barriers, I'm going to get real vulnerable here to the world, I guess, is shame. Yep. And it's about, I save, and I have a corporate day job, so I save money in 401k and all that stuff. But I know that the numbers, in terms of, not to your point, Jenifer, not about I want to have the most money, but I do know that I will need a lot of money for retirement, and I probably save more than most. I still know that it's not enough. And then I know, although I've worked on it over the recent year or two, I've had to work on some credit card debt and issues like that. And all those things that, for me to be really vulnerable with the audience, are shaming. Yeah. So until I got some of that under control, I wasn't even willing to go talk to an advisor. And I guess as I'm not by myself.
No,
I promise you're not.
And that's one of the reasons I became an air traffic controller, because it's not right. Like, and women in particular feel that shame and judgment, and some of it is put upon them by themselves, but in other times they've been treated poorly when they have gone to talk to somebody about it, and then it keeps them from progressing. And I've heard multiple stories from women who have been talked down to, and that's where some of that comes from. And we're all, we're all human and have the right to build wealth how we want to.
Well, we need to. We want to, and we need to. Jenifer, anything else to add to the actions our listeners can take?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for sharing that, because you're right on. Like, I promise you, you're not the only one. Carol and I joke that oftentimes talking about money feels as invasive as like doing the squat over a mirror to look at your lady parts, right? So like look at your vulva and be like, oh yeah, okay, this is like my anatomy, right? And so shame is huge in our culture. Shame around money is huge in our culture. Again, we could spend a whole podcast episode on that, but I'll answer your question. What women could do is, number one, like Carol said, I think reclaim the space between your ears. Shame can only live in the dark. So the more that you bring that stuff to light, the less shame you'll feel around money. And understand that financial confidence isn't about knowing everything. It is about learning, and it's about building skills. But it isn't about knowing everything. Even Carol and I don't know everything about money, right? Like, we know incrementally more than a layperson, but there's, plenty of people in plenty of areas of finance that have much more expertise in one area or another. Number two, so number one, I would say, like, just decide that you want to become more financially confident, and that you're worth it. You're worth being financially confident. And that financial confidence is a form of self-care. Like you and I talked about, Shannon, like, we have opportunities and we decided we wanted to be independent financially. That's so that a partner can't abuse us, an employer can't abuse us. If we're self-employed, a client can't abuse us, right? Like, if we're financially confident, we're owning, what our boundaries are, and we can say no. We say no to abusive situations. So number one, it starts, like Carol said, in your head. Number two, it is so much more simple than the industry. Again, like the rhetoric that we hear complicates things. I think that's a barrier to entry on purpose. Being financially confident really just comes down to two things. In your cash flow, you need to set aside some of what comes in. You need to enjoy most of it, and you need to set some of it aside for your future self. So that's one, is like, as much as you can master your cash flow, what's coming in on a monthly basis, what's going out on a monthly basis, same annually, because what happens monthly isn't the same as what happens annually, right? We don't take our pets to the vet, right, every month, but
I hope not.
Right. Yeah. Get pet insurance in that case, but owning your cash flow and just dedicating, I'm going to enjoy 95% of it. I'm going to put 5% of it away for my future self. So, that's the simple number one. And then number two is what you're doing with that difference, whether it's 5%, 15%, or 20%. 15 to 20 is like the great starting point and like goal. Is that you're investing the difference. And a lot of women get intimidated by that move from saving to investing. You do have to invest the difference for all the things that you mentioned earlier, right? We get to retirement with less money, and we live longer, and we have more healthcare needs. So we need a bigger pool of money. That only happens through investing. And then the last thing I'll say about any of this, being financially confident, again, is really just a set of skills. All skills are learned skills. Think about, before we ever drove a car, the first time we drove a car was terrifying, right? It was terrifying.
The first time I got on this podcast, it was terrifying.
Terrifying.
I hear you. Yep.
Yes. And the more you do it, the less terrifying it becomes. So you can read about it all you want. You can talk about it all you want. But the only way you really build a skill is by doing it. So you have to start somewhere. You have to invest. You have to do it scared. but just, like, you can do it. Think about all the things you did before, right? Like, if we're mothers, we gave birth before, we were terrified of doing it and we did it. It's one of the hardest things we can do. Right? So incremental progress, invest in yourself, self-care, all of that. I think that was fine.
I've never thought about self-care before, but that's really true. Yeah. And to your point about healthcare, it's self-care long-term when you're saving and investing, because then you're going to be able to do those, take care of yourself in the way that you need to. Yeah. Good point. So I'm going to, and again, be vulnerable. I hinted at this earlier. So I am an engineer by degree. And what I've always found curious about myself is I have to be good at math. I don't know an engineer that is not pretty decent at math. And we have to be good at database decision making. I mean, that's really that's our bread and butter. So there's a lot of our listeners out there that are STEM professionals or in a more technical field, but I avoid financial conversations at all costs. And I have the wired math brain.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and Carol, I'll start with you and then we'll get with Jenifer. Why do you think that happens? And how can people like me support other people like me to get over that hesitancy?
That's a great question, like Jen alluded to earlier, but I think I feel like it goes back to that emotional piece and the headspace between our ears. You could be great at numbers, but if you can't recognize, your thoughts and mindset around the money, then it doesn't matter if you can crunch numbers or not. And talking about money is so much more than being able to add and subtract and things like that too. I mean, it's a tool. We often say money is a tool to help you live the way that you want to and make a difference on the world how you want to. But that brings in so much more than just the number crunching. So to me, that's the biggest reason. And I know people that are great with money that aren't good with number crunching and aren't engineers because they've tackled that piece, and maybe they may be fascinated by money, but they just, maybe they've accepted where they, that whole space. So I'm rambling a little bit. So
no,
Jen,
it's really true, because I'm in the middle of getting ready to do my taxes and I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, I hate this stuff. Right.
Yeah.
I get it.
But
It's addition and subtraction, but golly.
You
Well,
know
and
how
doing
to do the
taxes,
numbers.
yeah, and doing
Yeah.
taxes isn't simple math, right?
No.
Doing taxes
No,
is
not really.
navigating a very complex tax code,
Yep.
Yeah, so that's not simple math, right? That's like that's where your engineer brain is like, this doesn't make any sense, and your engineer brain is
I know, it makes no sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'd rather go do calculus, because calculus makes more sense than
Yes,
this.
yes, yeah, and it's true. Wells Fargo did a study, and it said what they found is that people would rather talk about death than money.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Money. So like all of the hard topics, right? Like divorce, sex, death, those things, like money is number one on the list. I think a lot of it goes back to shame, like you brought up before, Shannon. In the way we've structured our society, for better or for worse, too many of us equate our self-worth with what's in the bank account or like how good we are with money. And my therapist gave me this gem pretty recently that, I will share with everybody. And we were talking about something, and she was like, now I was talking about presenting at somewhere that made me nervous. And I'm like, it really makes me nervous being in this room. And she's like, just remember that while you're presenting, your self-worth is going to be over here in a hammock just having some tea. Your self-worth is completely unaffected by what happens in your presentation over here. And I was like, I needed that. And same with our money, like our bank account, our balances, whatever, like our self-worth is in a hammock over here, relaxing, completely unchanged, regardless of any financial mistake you've made in the past, how confident or how much confidence you lack when it comes to financials. Like, you are a worthy, beautiful human, regardless of your financial status. And we don't hear that enough, right? We hear that it's all dependent on like what our output is and what our net worth is and all that kind of thing. And it's a huge lie. Like the last thing I'll add to this is that just because money is quantifiable doesn't mean that it's logical or rational. So in your data sets and in calculus, like those things are logical and rational. Money is not. It like
feels like it should be, and it isn't. I think maybe just help me declutter that barrier. Cause to me, money is dollars and cents. Why is it so sensitive compared to a math problem you solve?
Yeah. Yep. And where it sits in our brain, where money sits in terms of neuroscience, is that our brain thinks that it's like food in terms of survival, right? So if we don't have it, we're going to starve to death. So that's why, like, that's where that fear comes in, is that like in our society, if we don't have money, like we don't eat, we can't pay the bills, things like that. So again, you're normal, right? If it's not like a logical, rational thing. But the last thing I'll say about that is anybody who's giving you financial advice that's like, well, it's so easy, it's just quantifiable, blah, blah, blah. Even they're lying. They're not living in rational houses. They're not driving rational cars. They're not buying rational clothes and none of that is rational. 100% of it is preference, right? And they've just decided. So the people who are super confident, they just have a really good grasp of what they have and what they want, whether it's for today and for tomorrow. They aren't the ones that did better math.
Yeah, it's funny, Jenifer. I'm just sitting here thinking one of the words that I've tried to stop using as much as should. And I feel like that in my brain, I say, well, I should have saved more.
Yep. Nope.
I should have put away more for retirement. I shouldn't have bought that fun pair of shoes.
Yep.
On my credit card, right? And I'm using, I think, examples anybody can relate to.
Yeah.
And then the whole shame starts. And then when, like, maybe, I'm your client and I come to you, I think, man, like I'm a little over halfway through my career, I should have saved more. Like it's just there, and it links to the shame.
Yourself.
Yep.
Stop shitting on yourself.
Yeah.
We all
like that.
We all need to stop shitting
on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know, like, I was just on a call before this, and I've posted things on LinkedIn about this whole shoulding too, but we say, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, now I've tried to turn it around and be like, well, as long as you're adulting and doing, and you have taken care of yourself, well, yeah, then you should go do what you want and buy those shoes that you want, or you should buy that $5 latte and not beat yourself up about it, because those are the things that help us enjoy it. Do the adulting, and then it's okay to should buy that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Stop shooting.
And direct your money, right? You direct your money. I think that's the other mistake we make, is that we give everything else more control. And so when you're directing every dollar, you decide, this is my priority. I'm prioritizing this over this. This is more important to me than this. And that's where I want to put my money and my energy, right? And my time. But just a constant feeling of, I should be doing more. I don't know. I have people come to me all the time, like insecure about retirement. I'm like, you're right on track. If not ahead of time, you go ahead and spend more money and do it guilt-free because this is your trajectory.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I hate the whole stop buying your Starbucks latte thing, because I think there's little things in our life that give us joy, right? And it might be having that Starbucks mocha latte every morning, right?
I agree.
Well, then that's that's a priority for you, which goes back to what Jen said about where do you want to direct that money? And if that's what is your priority, then enjoy that Starbucks latte or mom and pop latte or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the first, and I tell my clients this all the time, like the first major financial decision we make is the money that comes in this month. What percent of it do I want to enjoy today? And what percent of it do I put aside for my future self? And again, like in a healthy trajectory, like if you want a normal retirement age, and not everybody wants a normal retirement age, but if you want the ability to walk away at 60 or 65 or 70, like somewhere in that range, then you can or should be enjoying 80 to 85% of all of your income and putting 15 to 20% of it away towards your future self. And anybody who's listening, who's putting nothing away, right, or only putting 2% away, that's a perfect place to start. Everybody starts there.
Yep.
Just increase it by 1%, like increase it by 1% every year, increase it by 1% every 6 months, whatever your pace is. If you start now, wherever you are now, eventually you'll get there.
Yep. I do the trick of when you get your merit increase every year, you do the automatic, and you don't, if you're lucky, and most I have been, you don't even see it, right? Because you get the, I'll call it 3%. And if you increase your 401k or whatever by 2%, then you don't even know the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
And most of those plans now, it's all automated, and when you first set it up, you can check a box saying, yes, increase my contribution 1 or 2% each year, where it just does it and you don't even have to mark it.
Yep. All right. So Jenifer, obviously you started your own company. Can you tell us a little bit about why and how and what services you offer?
Sure. Utor came after 18 years of working with like a big Fortune 50 company. And it was born out of two things. One, like I was tired of just being in meetings that were longer than necessary and had more words than necessary. Everybody who has a corporate job
is laughing. Everybody has a corporate job. You can hear me laughing, and whoever's listening is laughing.
Yeah. Another meeting that could have been an email. Whew, so many of those. And I had kids, I'm 43 and I have a 3 and a 5-year-old. So I needed autonomy and flexibility. So Utor is my ability to do that. And it's only been like my love affair for having done it has only been, I wish I would have done it 10 years earlier. But we offer 2 main services. Financial planning is the first service. That is a flat fee engagement for 1 year. There's 3 phases to that engagement. The first phase is we analyze your situation. We talk about what your priorities are, what your fears are, what you're excited about. And we run projections like, hey, this is what your life could look like under this scenario. This is what it looked like under this one. So we run a couple different scenarios, and together we come up with a project plan that says, all right, so based on where you are, where you want to be, here are your to-do items. I prioritize them in terms of like financial security and importance. And then the balance of the year is supporting you and making sure that happens. So for some of our clients, they need a lot of accountability. Have you done that yet? Have you done that yet? Some of our clients need no accountability. As soon as they have that project plan, they're like, bam, 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 they get it done. But they want education. Like, well, can I do this way or this way? This account or this account? This kind of insurance or this kind of insurance? So we offer advice, accountability, education, and sometimes coaching. So that's
I was going to say, I think therapy's got to be in there somewhere.
A little bit. Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. And that's okay too. I love therapy. I think it's great. I'm not a licensed therapist. I think.
We don't call it therapy. That's the coaching.
Yeah.
Coaching.
It's definitely coaching and a safe place. It's just a safe place to ask.
Yeah.
And then the second service we offer is investment management. So for people who don't want to make the portfolio decisions, like how should I be invested? What should I buy? When should I buy it? When should I sell it? What are the tax ramifications? What are fees and expenses? All of those decisions. If you want to outsource that, we do that as well. We charge a % of the assets.
Right. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of assets, Carol, forgive me, you told me the name and I've forgotten, but you have one fund in specific that you just launched, you're getting ready to launch. It's focused on either companies with women leaders or something similar. Can you educate myself and the audience on what that is?
It's the Alpha Female.
That's it. Alpha Female Fund.
Yes. Jen and our investment committee or investment team actually worked together about 6 months ago to put this whole portfolio together. After a lot of research and emotions and things. So I'll let Jen kind of talk about it a little bit more because it's one of her babies.
I love it. I couldn't remember the name, but I was like, I definitely want to talk about that.
Well, and obviously there's 2 sides to that she can kind of touch on. So
yeah, it's a little tongue in cheek, alpha female. In the investment world, alpha is a measure. So it's a measure of outperformance. So in the investment world, if you're expecting your portfolio to generate a 10% rate of return, If it generates a 2% or 12% rate of return, then that 2% difference is the alpha. That's
Okay.
So this whole portfolio is, or this investment strategy is a core US, public equity fund, which just means a US stock fund. And it's a really simple concept, actually. We took all of our same financial metrics. So when we evaluate companies and say, is this a good company for us to own and buy and invest in? We did all of that same analysis and added on top of it, layered in on top of it, how diverse is the company? And the data that's easiest to find in the US is gender diversity, but we looked for all intersections of diversity as much as we can find. The US is lagging significantly in this data. UK is ahead of us. Japan is even ahead of us in diversity reporting. Yeah.
I know the UK does some mandatory gender gap reporting, but I did not know about the other side of it.
It's really disappointing because in the US, if you have 100 employees or more, you have to report EEOC data to the EEOC, but you don't have to make that public. So neither the company nor the federal government makes that data public. Which I hope changes in the future, because I think it's important in terms of evaluating a company. But there's a growing body of data that shows the more diverse a team is, the better it performs. So the more profitable it is, the more innovative it is, and the better it is at mitigating risk. The top quartile gender diverse companies outperform the bottom quartile gender diverse companies by 25%. Ethnic diversity, it's bigger, it's 36%. Yeah. So we just took like all of our same financial metrics. We did all of that. And then we're like, we want top quartile companies in terms of diversity. And we created this strategy, and it's called Alpha Female, because my expectation is that, even just looking at it through that lens, is that they're higher quality companies. And I expect the higher quality companies to outperform their peers.
And are you seeing that so far? Or is it too early to tell?
We launched it. Yeah, we launched it in June last year, and it was our best performing strategy last year. It is a little bit like, the caveat to that is all our other strategies we can record from January to December. So like even time period to time period, I think it outperformed. But yeah, I mean, so far we have less than a year of data. But the answer is yes.
Well, I want to keep track on that one, because my guess is that it will, based on the other data that you referred to. So I just think that's fabulous. Alpha Female all the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know we've talked. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it was fun. It was a client who pushed me to create it, and I, thank her all the time, because it's been one of the most rewarding bodies of work that I've been able to do.
Yeah, I love that. Whoever she is, give her a shout out or a hug the next time you see her.
Deal.
I know we've talked a little bit about this, Carol, but like I said, getting started can be a little bit daunting. What is the one thing like you think people could start tomorrow? What's one action you think that women could take to change their own trajectory tomorrow?
That's a good question. So I know Jen and I have said, and we were just sharing this on, Jen had it on her Instagram account, and I'm like, that sums it up so greatly. But she, with the math, you figure a woman that works, or anyone that works a 40-hour week, that just last month would have worked 173 hours earning money. But they spend only an hour a month, if that. Actually, it's more like 5 minutes, I think, working on growing that money. So you look at
or figuring out what their strategy is or how they're going to invest it. Okay.
Looking at their money. And so even if they take 15 minutes a day that they would be kind of scrolling through their social media accounts, and take, shorten that, even cut it in half, and take that 5 minutes to look at their bank account, then they have an idea of what their money looks like. If they do that, even only on the weekdays during the month, that gives them an hour that they're looking at their finances that month. And just that's one way to grow that whole education piece and help build that confidence that we talked about in their mindset. So that's an easy step that everybody can take 5 minutes a day to do that from somewhere, whether they're drinking their latte, whether they're looking at social media, whether they're riding the bus to work. That'd be a good place to start.
Or for
Jen,
me, it's cut out a little bit of Netflix, but that's a whole different
no,
conversation.
exactly. Or you start
Yeah.
your Netflix 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I had some clients I worked with last year who were asking kind of the same question. And I was like, what is something you guys do together every day that's just like part of your routine? And they're like, we sit down and watch Netflix at the end of the day. Like when dinner's done, like the way that we unwind is we sit on the couch together and we cuddle and we watch Netflix. And I'm like, great. While you're sitting there together, before you turn on Netflix, 5 minutes or less, like no more than 5 minutes. Don't turn on the TV, open your phone and just open your bank app and just go through the transactions for the day. And the thing I think, like, again, back to the shame, there's no, this was a good or bad transaction. Just raise your awareness. Like oh, this is where my dollars went today. This is, every dollar we put out into the world is building what we see around us. Right. So like, oh, having more awareness about that, I think is good for everybody. So you're building awareness and you're learning about yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up. You don't have to make any changes. You don't even have to argue with your significant other or partner at the time. It's just, hey, let's just be more aware of this. And I think there's nothing more powerful or profound. There's no better way to start than just that. I guess I would add, have a community, start talking to other people about it.
Yeah.
So if you like, oh, we spent, like, I can't believe we spent that much money on whatever, like ask your friends, hey, what are you guys doing about this? Like we're working on, our spending plan and whatever, like, how do you guys handle it? And the more we can start to have conversations about it, the less anxiety and shame we all feel.
Yeah, it's really true. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I've done that around car insurance because I have a teenage driver now. And when we added a car and a person, I about fell out of my chair. And I think my husband did fall out of his chair. And so I started asking around, and it was a huge gap into what people were spending, but it got people talking about it too, which was great, having that dialogue. So
yeah, it's funny you say that.
A lot, but
I have a good friend and we're both building houses right now. And we had never really talked about money before that. We started as coworkers and then became really close friends. But now, to your point, that co-sharing that experience, let's call it, has caused us to have more. I wouldn't say we got into personal finances, but we've talked about, oh my gosh, this is costing so much. And I think, to your point, it just breached the gap.
Yeah. Daycare. We went through that, like when our kids were young, like, how much are you spending on daycare? Oh my God, what? And what if you do part-time?
And we do that, like, we're socialized, at least, again, like in normative gender roles. How many, like, I'm in 5 mom groups on Facebook, right? Of like, how do we handle this eating challenge? And like, what do we do about this challenge? And what do we do about this challenge? Or medical appointments, right? Like, oh, how are you getting your mammograms every year? Are you getting them every 3 years or every 5 years, right? Or even like pap screenings or whatever. So we can handle some tough stuff, like some hard subjects. So let's create that same kind of community around money. It doesn't have to live in the dark the way that it has.
That's so true. So you led me, Jenifer, I think I'll pay you later for this. You led me into my final, I'm gonna call it question, which is, I like to end the podcast with what's one piece of advice you can share. I want to be more specific here. If there's like that one broad piece of advice you'd like to share, inspirational advice for wealth generation, what would that be? And Carol, I'll start with you and we'll end with Jenifer.
Oh, all right. I got the first one, huh? An inspirational piece. Well, I really, we've spent all this time talking about shame, and I really have been trying over the years, like, trying to let women know, like, to stop beating yourself up. Like, it really, you are powerful, you can do it, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And just think about taking that one step, like Jen alluded to. And, we read about, I've read James Clear's book about atomic habits, and we look at all these things in other parts of our, careers and different things. But it's the same with money. Like, stop beating yourself up and just think about what's that one little thing, that 1% that I can do better today and then the next day, that will help me, get to where I want to be, and quit, crapping on myself when I do something wrong. Like, we're warriors. We can do this. It's not all about men.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen.
I'm not trying to male bash. I'm
just
just
made me-
saying, like,
Yeah. And they've had their time in the light.
Yeah.
Like, we need a little more balance. You just made me change mine, Carol.
sorry.
I think it's good. No, it's good. Because you just made me think of something I think is probably more helpful. I went to this amazing group gathering last fall of just 30 women, a small group of women that all want to close the wealth equality gap. So all 30 of us were just in a room for a couple days together, being like, how do we do this? And kind of whiteboarding some things. And one of the women there was fabulous. Somebody had asked her about imposter syndrome. And she goes, one of the gifts my mother gave me was that she told me, don't ever be afraid to walk into any room because you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing, especially not those guys, And
It's so true.
It is true. I love that so much. Like, what's cascaded since then, as I think about all of these things that we just think are true and have been around forever. To go back to the beginning of our conversation, we're like, women had to get a spouse or a father's signature in order to get a credit card at the bank, in 1973. And it was like, these things have not always been true. They were just made up at some point in time. FICA was just made up in the late 80s. GDP is a number and a measure that was just made up like less than 100 years ago. All these things are just made up. They're all made up. So, like, we can make up our own things. We don't have to go by what somebody made up 30, 40 years ago or 100 years ago. It wasn't that good. It's like we're more than past due to just make up new things. So go ahead and just make them up.
Yep. And figure it out. And I'll tell you the one that I'll leave with, the one kind of why my passion is what it is. And I think that getting more women in STEM is going to help close that gender pay gap. If you want to catch me offline, I can tell you the story. It really changes the trajectory of what you can do. And I want to shout out to my women of color out there. We got to change that. So when you look at the pay gap for women, the distribution for white women is actually getting close to that of men. The median is still different, but the distribution has shifted significantly. And really, it's women of color. And, we all need to lift each other up to help more women of color get in engineering. So, for example, right now, a SWE study from 2019 said that only 6% of graduating engineers are women of color, which still blows my mind.
Wow.
And then just making sure that we start breaking down the barriers and systems that are holding back people who've been marginalized over the years. And particularly, my passion is women of color. So
I love that. Can I add to your women of color?
Sure, please. Yep.
So there was a recent study that evaluated there's about 5,000 publicly traded companies in the US today. There's about 277 of them that have released their EEOC data. Of those companies, there was an analysis done based on demographics and financial impact.
Okay.
The highest correlation to a healthier financial company were BIPOC women managers. They measured 11 different financial metrics, and the larger percentage of BIPOC women managers, the better all of the financial metrics were.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So not only are they underestimated and totally biased against, right?
Yeah.
There's so much data that shows they aren't hired at the same rates. They aren't promoted at the same rates.
Yep.
And it's tragic because the data shows that when they are included, the whole company performs better.
Yep. So the shout out, we're going to get there one baby step at a time. So I can't believe that we're to the end of our conversation, but if you all will give your social media handles, both for your company as well as personally, I want folks to know where to find you. So Jenifer, if you'll start, and Carol will end with you, and then we'll get into the conversation, which I'm sad about.
Come utorwealth.com, UTOR. That is our website. I am at Jen Sapel on Instagram. And then Jenifer Sapel, Jenifer with one N on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And Carol, how about you?
N. I am at the Carol Parrish on Instagram. And on actually LinkedIn, I'm now the Carol Parrish too, or you can just search Carol Parrish, and I'm usually the one that pops up with 2 R's.
2 R's, 1 N for Jenifer and 2 R's for Carol Parrish.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been so much fun. I didn't know I've had this much fun talking about finances, but thank you so much for being honest and real. I love this conversation.
You too. Thank you for opening up too.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon, for having us.
To our listeners, we've got a couple more episodes, so hang in there with me. I will see you in the next episode. Bye, everybody.